Today we're going to talk about the derailleur and what it does for the bike, how it shifts the gear, and how simple it will be for everybody to be able to adjust it. We're going to discuss the high limits, the low limits, and how much the gears actually move when it shifts from gear to gear. This is an example of exactly how the derailleur works. It actually does what it says it's doing. It derails the chain off of the sprocket so it can go down to the lower or the next higher depending on the way you shift it. Always make sure you're pedaling when you shift. When I shift up, it'll go to a lower gear. You can see the derailleur pushed it off. I do it again, it pushes it off and moves again. You can also see when I go back to a lower gear, the derailleur itself is also moving left to right while it's also pushing the gear back and forth. That is the basics of what the derailleur does. Lifts the chain while it's moving off the sprocket so it can go side to side. At this point, we have a minor adjustment that needs to be made. When I start to pedal the bike, you'll hear a clanking noise, and what that is the chain is actually trying to shift to the next gear right now. There's too much tension, so we need to relieve that tension, and that can be adjusted right here by hand by yourself. As I'm pedaling, you can hear that clanking noise. If I do a quarter turn, each time I do that, it'll move it just a little bit. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, just a little bit left, 6, and now all you're hearing is the actual freewheel of the bike itself. If you were to keep going, eventually it'll go too far, and now there's too much pressure and it's trying to go back the other direction. So just like I did before, now I'll go counterclockwise. And now the noise is gone, so now I'm properly adjusted for that gear. Now we're going to discuss the high end limit and the low end limit. Those two screws are used to keep the chain from going too far above and off the cassette or all the way down so your chain does not fall off. The third one is for the hanger itself, just to make sure it's tight and at the proper angle. We'll discuss all three of these on the bike. So now we're going to start pedaling the bike. We're in 5th gear. I shift once. It goes to 6th gear, and when I shift again, it didn't move into 7th gear. If I continue to pedal and start backing out my high-end limit, you can hear it slowly getting ready. Now it's moved in. So at this point, I have my high-end limit set exactly where it needs to be so that my chain cannot derail all the way off. Even if I was to press really hard on the shifter, my limit is set for the high end. So you have to remember that the high end limit is referring to your highest speed gear. Not the highest part of the cassette, but your highest speed gear. The lower limit, we'll show you, will do the same thing. If I set my limit too far, the chain will fall off. If I don't set it far enough, it will stay in 2nd gear. Now we're going to discuss your low limit screw here, which would be your lowest gear. The bike is currently in 3rd gear. I'm going to shift it into 2nd, and then when I go to shift it into 1st gear, it physically won't let me do that, and I'll adjust it the same way I did the high limit by backing out the low limit screw. Pedaling along, we shift into 2nd, moves just fine. I cannot physically move it into 1st gear. We'll stop it, back it out, half a turn of the screw. See if it'll let me shift now. Nothing yet. The reason that we're only doing a half a turn at a time is we don't want to set it too far where the chain will jump off and fall over the other side. It's making that same noise as adjustment, so we're really close. The derailleur wants to move. Right now it sounds like a derailleur adjustment, but we know that we've messed with it, so we're right at that fine point where it's just enough movement left to right on here to get it there but not to seat it firmly. So we'll back it out one more half turn. And now we're to where we need to be. It might be a little bit of noise, but we're going to shift all the gears to make sure everything's back where it belongs. 2nd, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh gear, and then we should be able to go back up. Sounds quiet where we made our adjustment. Now both our high end limit is limited to on the bottom side and our low limit is limited on the high side. If we were to let these screws out further, the chain would come off. So at this point, your knowledge you need to know is that if your chain is coming off to the inside of the bike, you need to tighten your lower limit. If your chain is coming off on the outside of the bike, you will need to tighten your high end limit. The top screw is very seldom needed adjustment. There is a bevel on this washer that's mounted to the derailleur. As you adjust the screw, you'll see that that moves left, down, or right, up. Most times this will not need to be adjusted. Just be aware that this washer should be about centered on there. It'll be a very fine-tuned adjustment that most people will never need to make.